The Hopetown Murders. Welcome to Ontario Cold Cases, Canada's true crime podcast. I'm your host, Jay Nicoll of Nicoll Investigations, and today we're stepping back to 1987 to unravel a haunting unsolved mystery, the murders of George Simpson and Helen Marguerite Simpson in the quiet village of Hopetown, Ontario. This case, marked by brutality and isolation, has lingered in the shadows for nearly 4 decades, with no resolution in sight. Let's dive into the chilling details and explore what happened on that fateful night. Hello, I'm Jay Nicoll, Nicoll Investigations. This is Ontario Cold Cases, Canada's true crime podcast. Ontario Cold Cases is a gripping true crime podcast that shines a light on unsolved murders, disappearances, and forgotten crimes from across the province and the world. With meticulous research, compelling storytelling, and a commitment to historical accuracy, we bring you the real stories of victims, investigators, and suspects, stories that demand to be heard. Each week, we take you deep into the world of true crime with a packed schedule of episodes. Tuesdays, historical true crime cases, exploring infamous and obscure crimes from history. Wednesdays, the Mick and Mac Mysteries, a thrilling fictional detective series set in 1950s Toronto. Thursdays, World Cold Case Thursday, investigating unsolved cases from around the globe. Sundays, Ontario Cold Cases, the latest episode uncovering an unsolved mystery from Ontario. From high-profile crimes that shock the nation to little-known cases waiting for justice, we uncover the truth, one case at a time. Join us as we explore the dark corners of history and mystery, where every clue could lead to answers and every case deserves a second look. Subscribe now wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts and never miss an episode of Ontario Cold Cases, Canada's true crime podcast. Circumstances of the murders. The incident occurred on a wet Saturday night, with the bodies discovered by Marguerite's son Alan and a group of friends. Marguerite was found lying on the kitchen floor, while George was discovered outside near a camping trailer, covered with a wooden pallet and tires. Both had been shot several times with a high-powered rifle, later identified as the .303 Lee Enfield, a bolt-action firearm converted from a military model to a sport rifle. Reports suggest the murders may have occurred as early as September 9, 1987, with the bodies found 3 days later, indicating a delay in discovery that may have impacted evidence collection. The farmhouse's remote location in Concession in Dalhousie Township, about a 30-minute drive from Perth, likely contributed to the isolation and difficulty in solving the case. A 1990 article from the Ottawa Citizen titled Hopetown Horror, Murder of Marguerite and George Simpson, Ottawa Valley Serial Killer, noted that the killer was believed to have driven to the farmhouse and entered through an open door, with Marguerite shot in the kitchen, adding to the theory of a targeted attack. Picture this: a rain-soaked night in a secluded corner of Lanark County. The farmhouse stands alone, surrounded by fields and forests, far from prying eyes. The delay in finding the bodies, 3 days, combined with the weather, likely washed away vital clues. And that .303 Lee Enfield rifle was a common weapon in rural Ontario, making it nearly impossible to trace. Was this a planned execution or a crime of opportunity? The open door of Marguerite's death in the kitchen suggests the killer knew the layout, or at least felt bold enough to walk right in. The victims. Let's get to know the people at the heart of this tragedy. Helen Marguerite Simpson, 58, was a quiet, friendly woman and a mother to Alan, who lived with her at the farmhouse. Her brother, George Simpson, known as George, was 40 and worked as a part-time building inspector for the former Lanark Township since 1979. Described as meticulous and dependable, George was the kind of neighbor who'd always lend a hand. Lying in such a remote spot, the Simpsons kept to themselves, but they were well liked in Hopetown. Their deaths didn't just take 2 lives. They shook a community that prided itself on its peace and simplicity. Up next, the investigation. The investigation. The Ontario Provincial Police took charge of the case, with detectives Larry Edgar and Charles Judson leading the effort. They recovered the murder weapon, a .303 Lee Enfield rifle, from a nearby swamp called Black Creek. But here's the catch. The rain had done its damage, and forensic evidence was scarce. The rifle's serial number was traced to a purchase in Ottawa, but it led nowhere. In a region where these rifles were as common as pickup trucks, pinning to one owner was a long shot. The OPP worked tirelessly, chasing leads and even exploring rumors of ties to other Eastern Ontario murders from 1975 to 1987. Some whispered about a revenge motive linked to George's job as a building inspector, maybe a disgruntled property owner. Those theories fizzled out. In 2 months, the trail went in the cold, leaving investigators with more questions than answers. Other murders connected. The victims. Ontario Provincial Police investigated 6 deaths in the area, which they believed may be the work of a serial killer. The deaths occurred over a 12-year period, from 1975 to 1987. 5 of the deaths involved middle-aged or elderly bachelors who lived alone. The 6th death involved a widow who also lived by herself. John King, Morwood, Ontario, July 14, 1987. The 59-year-old bachelor's remains were found in the charred rubble of his home, which had burned down in an early morning fire. A bullet fragment found by investigators indicate he was shot and killed before the fire was set. King was described by a relative as a very quiet and honest person. Wallace Johnston, Monkland, Ontario, May 17 or 18, 1987. A 48-year-old dairy farmer, he was killed by a gunshot wound to the head while watching television in his home. A shot was fired at Johnston from outside, through his dining room window. Johnson was a bachelor, was described by police as a quiet man with no known enemies. Harold Davidson, Princeton, Ontario, November 25, 1983. The 60-year-old World War I Williamsburg farmer was found shot to death in his country home, November 25, 1983. The weapon used in the killing was a .38 caliber revolver. Davidson was a bachelor and was described as a quiet man who kept to himself. Archie Collison, Oxford Mills, Ontario, November 18, 1983. A 71-year-old recluse was found dead in the rubble of his log cabin after an early morning fire destroyed the building. He also lived by himself. Police were known to have been reinvestigating his death. Ken Murphy, Concession 7, Finch Township, January 8, 1981. The remains of the 68-year-old bachelor were found amid the charred rubble of his home after it was destroyed by fire. Officials originally believed an overheated wood stove caused the fire, but police are now linking his death to the recent string of murders throughout the area. Murphy had told a friend he was staying in that night because of extremely cold weather. Lillian Toussaint, Glen Stewart, Ontario, September 24, 1975. The 83-year-old widow was believed to have died as a result of a fire that destroyed her home. It's not known if a weapon was used in her death, police said. Toussaint was described by neighbors as a quiet recluse who rarely ever went out. Up next, the aftermath. The aftermath. Hopetown was never the same after that September night. In the village where doors once stayed unlocked, fear took root. Residents like Peter McLaren, a friend of Alan's, later said, "It was pretty hard on the people around Hopetown. A lot of people were afraid and still are." The senseless violence felt personal, even to those who didn't know the Simpsons well. Decades later, the case remains a wound that won't heal. No arrests, no convictions, just a lingering mystery in a quiet corner of Ontario. That's it for today's episode of Ontario Cold Cases. The murders of George Simpson and Helen Marguerite Simpson are a stark reminder of how even the most peaceful places can harbor dark secrets. If you have any information, however small it seems, please reach out to the Lanark County OPP at 1-888-310-1122 or Crime Stoppers at 1-800-222-8477. Your call could crack this case wide open. Thanks for listening. Stay curious, stay safe, and we'll see you next time. Because every case deserves answers, and every victim deserves justice.